Hello, Mr. Nichols. Thank you for taking time out of your day to give me this opportunity for an interview.
Hi, Jake. Glad this time worked out for us both. And well, we get started. I'm just going to ask you some questions, and I'm going to give you a chance to ask me any questions that you have about the position. And we'll just start off. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in this position?
All right. My name is Jacob Nichols. I am currently an economics and computational analysis major at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. I have a strong background in engineering. I've worked part-time and as an intern in a manufacturing engineering position. And my first 2 years of college actually were as an aerospace engineer. And, I was interested in this opportunity because as an operations planner, you have the opportunity to deal with both the business side of running a company and making decisions, as well as sort of tapping into the engineering training and potential where you have strong developed problem-solving skills, and really you get good at making decisions in that field.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. And actually, for this position, since we are in a manufacturing environment, we're a relatively small site. So, like you said, folks that work for us have an opportunity to get in a lot of different things, and it's definitely a good fit for us because you get asked to help out in a lot of different areas. It sounds like a good fit for the type of person that we're looking for, interested in some technical things as well as business side of things, and making sure that we keep our customer orders on track and everything gets out on time and as expected. So that's interesting. I did notice on your resume about the switch. I was curious about why you switched majors there. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I switched at the end of my second year, well, after my fifth semester, actually. The reason being was I started getting into the higher level engineering classes, and I realized that the stuff that I was learning in those classes, like upper level compressed aerodynamics and stuff like that, while it is helpful to know for an engineer, it wasn't really helpful for the type of position that I ended up wanting to do as a career. I never really wanted to be like the engineer that sits down and actually designs the airplane. I always wanted to use engineering as a path to get into the more business and decision making side of things. And for me, engineering was always just a path to get there. And I felt like the upper level stuff in engineering wasn't really going to be helpful for what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I felt like a business-related major and finishing off my school in that way would be a lot more helpful and give me a lot more exposure to tools and tips and tricks and stuff I would be doing in my day-to-day life after school.
Yeah, sure, that makes sense. How are you finding the new coursework on the business side of things? Are you enjoying those classes? Are you learning some good stuff there?
Yeah, it's definitely a positive switch for me. I enjoy the classes a lot more. It gives me a unique perspective. It's a side of things that I never really saw before. In high school, I had a lot of experience in engineering, and I always thought I was going to be an engineer all the way through high school. So I never really got exposed to this side of the equation as much as I would have liked to. A lot of my classes right now are economics classes, and I do really enjoy those classes because they teach you to think in a way that's slightly different from engineering, but also it shares a lot of the same philosophies where you have to think through problems in a similar manner, but sort of the way you look at them, the way you look at the problems, you're using different tools, but this process and the end goal of solving the problems is the same. So it's an interesting challenge.
That's makes a lot of sense. As you do any job, there's a lot of different facets to it, so it's good to have some different backgrounds that are behind you. It's like that'll help you interact with other folks when you get out there in the workforce. Can you talk a little bit about? Looks like it's good internship experience here. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the work you did during your internships and how they might apply, kind of like you're saying, with some of the technical skills that you've developed, and as well as on the business side, if you had a chance to kind of use both sets of skills, and just talk a little bit about how your experience was.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start off by just sort of outlining what my tasks were and what I did in that position and how they sort of developed as I stayed with the company. At first, when I was hired, the intention wasn't at all for me to be doing what I ended up doing. The intention was just mainly for me to be assembling parts, but then once my actual boss, my direct boss, got a hold of my resume, he saw I was capable of a lot more, and I had a lot more training than they had initially realized. So he started giving me more in-depth tasks than I would have normally gotten. One of the first things that I did was I spent some time with the inventory crew, and they sort of walked me through the process and showed me what they did there. And one of the benefits of that was they didn't really have very good process control for that department. So within my first week there, I noticed some ways that I could improve their processes and made some suggestions to my boss and the general manager of the plant. And they liked my ideas. They actually ended up paying more attention to that process and implementing some of the things I suggested. Then after that, I think that really helped them realize that I could be more valuable than just assembling parts like they had originally suggested. So soon after that, me and my brother, who was also working with them at the time, were assigned to work on programming a production robot that they had recently installed. And basically for the rest of that summer, we spent most of our time programming that robot. We took it from a state where it could barely move with manual inputs, and just at the end of that summer, we finished up making it fully automated and capable of actual production. It was a pretty complex system. It could take multiple parts, put it in 3 different ovens, and the process was called dip braising, where basically it would heat it up in the oven. Once it reached temperature, it would take it over to a vat of molten salt. It would dip it in the salt for an appropriate time based on a barcode that we programmed in. And then once it was done in the bath, while it was in the bath, it would melt the parts together and attach them. It's a sealing process. And once it's done in the bath, it would take it out, put it into an air quench. There was 2 possible air quenches, and then while it's cooling off, it can go do other operations and stuff. And then whenever it's ready, it would come and grab it and put it on an exit conveyor belt. And that whole process is automated. We taught the robot how to make all of those decisions itself in a safe and efficient manner. And it was mostly about like time management and figuring out when it has the appropriate amount of time to do certain actions and when certain positions in the process were free. So it was a lot of handshaking between different sensors and everything. And it was a pretty in-depth process. Obviously, it took the 2 of us the whole summer to complete. And by the end of it, we were able to actually get it into fully working in a production setting.
That's great. That sounds like a great project. Did you have the opportunity to work with different folks there as part of that project? From the production floor and other areas, and other departments, or were you pretty much just kind of on your own, working through on that task?
With that task specifically, we had a lot of interaction with the actual production workers for that process. Before the robot was implemented, they would just assemble the parts and put them in the oven and take them out and dip them by hand, which was sort of a dangerous process, which is why they implemented the robot. So a lot of what we did was talking to those people who were in charge of actually dipping it by hand and learning what they do and why they do what they do, and sort of figuring out a way that the robot could do it in a safer and more effective manner. But also, in the downtime between when we were working on things for that project, for example, we couldn't shut down production entirely, so we couldn't work on it 24/7 while we were there. So we were doing other projects as well throughout the rest of the plant. So I ended up writing a lot of process control documentation. So I was either defining a new process or writing down the process that they currently use for the purposes of quality control and having accountability, as well as training people. So I got to work with a lot of the different departments in that setting.
That's great. Yeah, it sounds like you had a lot of good exposure there. It sounds like since you dealt with some different people, and again, manufacturing environment like the one that we have, where you ran into some different characters, different types of people with different backgrounds and education levels. Can you talk a little bit about it? A little bit about that? How you found it was working with folks? Did you have an easy time communicating with them, or did you ever have any challenges? Trying to get somebody to do things differently or anything like that you can talk about?
Oh yeah, absolutely. First of all, at this facility, it was 2 years before I got taken on as an intern that our manufacturing engineering department started. And before that, really not many people in the facility did have a college education. It was mostly just like the front office people. So most of the people that I was working with actually didn't have a formal college education. There was a lot of people on the machine floor that had, 2-year technical school to learn how to use the CNC machines and stuff like that. So yeah, there was I was working with a variety of people with different levels of education and different backgrounds. I actually enjoyed that experience. I was always in like the engineering classes in high school, always talking to people who always planned on going to college and getting the degree. So it was nice to talk to people and experience people with a different mindset from what I was used to. A lot of the floor workers have been in that facility for 30, 40 years. So when they had this intern, I was actually one of the first 3 interns that they hired. So none of them were really used to having somebody so young working with them. And a lot of them were very resistant to work with me at first. Because, I come in, I'm a manufacturing engineer, so my job is to sort of scrutinize what they're doing and see if I can make any improvements. And a lot of them were resistant to change. They think because they've been doing it for 40 years, they already have the best way nailed down. And that was something our whole department actually was struggling with because it was relatively new. But while I was working on the robot, actually, I spent a lot more time out on the floor with those people I got to develop a pretty strong relationship with them. And through my time working out there with them, they became a lot more receptive to my ideas and the things I was talking about. And a lot of them actually ended up coming to me to with like new ideas of their own, whereas before they were just doing the same thing for 40 years without really thinking about it. So I learned a lot from them, and I'd like to think they also learned a lot from me.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you had a really good experience with that. That's great. I mean, what would you say, kind of along those lines? Through your experiences there, those internships, what would you say would be the biggest thing or the most important thing that you learned from that experience that you could kind of take on with you throughout your career?
I think it ties into the previous question a lot, actually. I think what the biggest thing I learned is how to talk to people and communicate with people and in an effective way in a professional environment. It's not something I'd experienced before, so it was a lot of new information for me. But I learned how to communicate with, people above me. So like the general manager, I had a pretty decent line of communication with him. He was very nice and very friendly and very helpful in that experience, as well as my direct boss and all of the employees in the manufacturing engineering department. You had to sort of talk with them a little differently and communicate with them differently than the rest of the floor workers and everything. So it was I learned effective ways to communicate to different types of people, and most of all, how to make good impressions in the workplace.
Yeah, great, very good. You've probably heard this question before, but what would you say are your greatest strengths and your biggest weaknesses?
My greatest strength, I think, is a bit of an unconventional one. I think I'm good at recognizing problems in processes or ideas, which, sort of, if you look at it from an outside point of view, it seems sort of like just criticism, but it's really important to be able to recognize when you're doing something wrong, and also before you implement an idea, if you can recognize that there's a problem with it, then it's going to save you a lot of time and effort and money in testing and setting it up before you realize, it's not actually going to work. As far as weaknesses, obviously I don't have a whole lot of experience in a professional business side of things. I just started. This is my first semester in business, so I'm not going to have as much experience as maybe some other candidates might. But I hope that my experience in engineering can be a good enough substitute, and I think it'll allow me to look at things from a different perspective and sort of, get a different point of view than some other candidates might be able to bring to the table.
Sure. Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about maybe an example where you worked in a team project? It could be school or from internship experience or anything anything team based that you worked towards a goal together, and how that dynamic went and how you contributed to the team.
Well, as I mentioned before, in my internship, I worked closely with my brother on the robotics project. So that was a lot of back and forth and group communication, although it might be easier than other settings because he is my brother. We've been communicating for our whole lives. But also in high school, I was on our VEX robotics team, which basically there's a yearly challenge that this organization puts out every year. And we have like a set of specific parts we're allowed to use, and we build a robot, and we competed within the state at the state level, as well as we made it to the world level competition one year. So that was a lot of meeting up after school on weekends, and just a lot of group work, making group decisions on how to implement the best solutions to participate in the game of that was designed and assigned to us that year. And it was a relatively large group, about 10 to 20 people were at each meeting, depending on how active they were, how much time they had to contribute to the project. But so we got a lot of different perspectives and a lot of good experience in how to make group decisions and solve problems as a group.
Yeah, good. What would you say, from back to your intern experiences there, what would you say was the single biggest impact that you had, that you were able to provide, to the company? Any particular project or accomplishment? What would you say the biggest impact you had?
I do keep going back to this robotics project that I worked on, but it was actually hugely impactful for the company. It was the first step that they took into automation, and actually right now they're in the process of getting a second robot for the welding task. I like to think it's because we proved that it could be effective with our current project. I've actually got a chance to look at the cost saving analysis for it, and it turns out with this new system it is 2 to 3 times more efficient than the previous method, because the robot is capable of optimizing the workflow and keeping things in the oven for the exact amount of time that it needs to be, and they won't forget about parts, and it doesn't make as many mistakes. So, dip brazing is one of 2 processes that they do at this company. So, basically, 50% of the revenue that they have goes through this process that is entirely automated, whereas before it wasn't at all. And it's 2 to 3 times more efficient now. So it has had a huge impact on the company, and it has allowed them to maintain a contract with Boeing, where they've basically told them there's a specific part that they're making, and they can make as many of them as we're capable of making. So that's a huge contract for the company, and I don't think it would have been possible without the work that I did on the robotics project.
Yeah, wow, that's pretty good. Can you think of an example of maybe that you learned from the actions of someone else, a coworker, perhaps? Kind of learn from something that maybe they did well or maybe not so well, that you kind of just experienced and learned from and took something away from for yourself?
Yeah, I did have one coworker in the manufacturing engineering department. He was the hardware engineer, and he got hired through my direct boss. The manufacturing engineering manager was his friend from high school, and he was the first hire that he made because obviously this department was new. My boss was the first engineer that they hired at the facility, and this hardware engineer that I'm talking about was his first hire, and he hired him mostly because they were friends in high school, and he doesn't really have the proper attitude in the workplace that I would expect in a professional environment, mostly because they were friends before. I don't think he respects the manager's authority as well as he should, and it's not like he's like a horrible problem. It's just there's some behavior that I've seen in him that it's a sort of a good warning, to not get too close or too friendly with your boss to the point where you don't respect them. and to just take your job seriously, because I could see where their friendship was actually starting to get strained because of their relationship at work, and he wasn't respecting him in the way that he should.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Do you have any questions for me or about the position at all?
I would like to know more about sort of the history of this position, and what the previous holder of the position, what you thought they did well, and what areas you thought they needed improvement on.
Sure. Yeah. The previous person in the position had been in some different roles, kind of, with the company, and kind of, had a good grasp of whole manufacturing setup. Came from that side, and knew the equipment well, and kind of knew the whole process. So that was something that they understood. How you schedule and sequence orders and set things up for efficiency. They've had a pretty good net for that. So that was a positive. Kind of an area that they were kind of lacking was more on the trying to take a step back and design a process for doing all that, and developing some tools to kind of analyze what the best way of going about things and doing them faster, things like that. Just more kind of on the analysis side of things. That was kind of an area that was maybe a little lacking, and could have used some improvement. But it's an important role for the facility, and like I said before, you need to interact with different departments and different folks, and it's really driven by what the customer needs are, and making sure that those needs are met. Obviously, we're in business for the customers, and if somebody orders something and doesn't get what they need when they need it, when you agree to it, that's a bad thing for the site, and it's really a major responsibility for someone in this role. So,
absolutely,
definitely an important position.
Yeah, like I was talking about before when you asked about my strengths. I think I would be good in some of the areas that you mentioned the previous person was lacking, where I am good at taking a step back and thinking through a decision before you make it, and taking an objective look at the whole problem. And I think I could use my skills to really work well with you in this position.
That's great. It's good. Do you think you would be interested in working, going back to the same company that you've been during before? Is that a company that you would be interested in working for, or are you looking for something to change, something different?
I enjoyed the environment that I was working with. I like all of the people there. It's a fun environment. It was a little far out of the way. It's sort of in the woods in the middle of nowhere, so I wouldn't mind a bit more of a approachable facility. But I think I would be happy returning to that company, assuming they have enough openings and positions for me to move up and reasonably climb within the ranks of the company. As well as I would be happy finding a new company to work with.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, is part of the reason why you're interested in our company kind of the size and potential opportunities? Is that something that's important to you as far as possibly moving to different facilities or different areas? Kind of longer term, do you have some specific goals that you would like to reach as far as what levels or types of positions kind of down the road further in your career?
Yeah, I definitely think the structure of your company aligns well with a lot of the goals that I have. There's a lot of room for me to move up and move up within the company, as well as I wouldn't mind moving to different facilities to be able to achieve my goals for the future. I'm not tied to one specific location. I grew up in Maine, moved to Pennsylvania for school, moved to Alabama for college, and I'm not tied to any one location. So I am definitely open to moving around to be able to achieve my career goals.
Great. Well, do you have any other questions for me?
I think I'm all set. I appreciate you taking the time to interview me.
Absolutely. It was a great discussion, and it sounds like you've had some great experiences there, which is great, and appreciate the chance for being able to talk to you today.
All right. I look forward to working with you in the future.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Goodbye.